Hello everybody, today we're talking about foodborne illness or food poisoning. So what exactly is foodborne illness? It is the result of eating foods that have been contaminated with harmful pathogens such as bacteria or virus or some sort of toxins. It is a big problem in the United States. Every year it's estimated that about 48 million people get sick with food poisoning, and that is an estimate because sometimes it's hard to tell. A lot of times people think they have the flu or a stomach bug, and so they don't even realize that they have food poisoning. It's estimated 1 in 6 Americans will get sick every year from food poisoning. 128,000 of those people will be hospitalized, and there will be about 3,000 deaths because of food poisoning. The symptoms are upset stomach, abdominal cramps, and sometimes those can be very severe, diarrhea, fever and chills, headache, nausea and vomiting, weakness, so again, sounds a lot like the flu. Symptoms usually develop about 24 to 72 hours after you eat the contaminated food. It's your body's trying to kind of get rid of those toxins. So treatment, most people recover in a couple of days. Sometimes it's very quick illness that people get sick, and it almost seems like as soon as it's out of your body, you feel a little bit better. Treatment-wise, you need to drink plenty of fluids to help replace any lost fluids from the nausea and the vomiting and diarrhea. But obviously, if they're very severe symptoms, you need to seek medical treatment and go to the hospital. Often people don't realize they have the food poisoning, like I said. Sometimes they think it's the flu, and they don't even know. To actually know you have food poisoning and what type of food poisoning you have, they could take samples of the suspect food and test that to see if there's bacteria present, what kind of bacteria. Although a lot of times you don't know maybe what food caused it unless there's a widespread outbreak. There's a wedding and everybody that went to the wedding gets sick from the catering. Not the way you really want your wedding to be remembered, but if there's leftover food, that would be something that could be tested. Sometimes it's when you see recalls that are out there or food chains that are under the microscope. They can test the foods that have been in those restaurants or in those companies to pinpoint the type of food poisoning. They can also take blood tests or samples from the sick person. So if you don't know the food, they can still test samples from the person who's sick to help figure out what kind of food poisoning they have. Lots of different types of food poisoning. Salmonella and E. coli are ones that you definitely hear in the news. Listeria is another one. Botulism is a very severe type of food poisoning. It can be the most likely to be fatal because it attacks your nervous system. Other ones, Campylobacter, hepatitis A, norovirus, staph, those are all things that are transferred through food. Sources of outbreaks, when you see that people are getting sick, a lot of times they're getting sick from restaurants. It's about 52% of the time. 18% of the time is at home, where you maybe aren't handling your food correctly, you're not leaving it out too long, or maybe you're not cooking it thoroughly enough. 4% of the time is schools. 22% is others, so maybe it was contaminated in the factory or in the fields when it was harvested. And then 4% is unknown. So nobody wants food poisoning. So to prevent it, these are the 4 safe food handling principles. Clean, separate, cook, and chill. And so we're going to talk about each one of those. Clean, you really need to avoid cross-contamination. So the cleaner you are, the more you can prevent the transfer of bacteria from one food to another. Make sure you're cleaning surfaces before you start cooking, after you cook, so that you can get any residue, any bacteria cleaned up and prevent it from being transferred to something else. Make sure you rinse fruits and vegetables before you peel them, cut them, or cook them. Wash your hands, and you should be washing your hands before you start cooking. If you handle any kind of raw meat or eggs, you want to make sure you're washing your hands in warm soapy water. So proper hand washing, make sure you wet your hands, put soap and rub them together with the soap, scrub your hands for 20 seconds. Sometimes they say to sing the alphabet while you're scrubbing your hands. Rinse your hands under warm water and then dry with a towel. A lot of times they'll say with water temperature, you want it the hottest that you can stand to be able to kill that bacteria. Separate. Make sure you're separating ready-to-eat foods, things that you're not going to cook, from those that would need cooked, especially at the store and when you're storing them in the refrigerator or at home. At the store, you can get the bags to put meat in so it doesn't contaminate the rest of the things in the cart. Try to keep them in their own part of the cart. And then again, in the refrigerator, store them in separate drawers or separate areas of the refrigerator. Like I said, raw meat or seafood, put it in plastic bags at the store so it prevents it from contaminating other things in the cart. Use separate cutting boards for meat and vegetables. You don't want to cut your meat on the same cutting board that you would be cutting the vegetables for your salad on after that. And usually with cutting boards for meat, you want to use a plastic cutting board. Sometimes with wooden cutting boards, the juices and the bacteria can get stuck in the fibers, and that can cause somebody to get sick later. Don't use the same plate for raw and cooked food. So if you put your hamburgers on a plate, take them to the grill, you need to wash that plate or get a new one before you bring the cooked hamburgers back in. Cook. Make sure you're cooking the foods to the proper internal temperature. You want them to be cooked all the way through. To know how that is actually cooked all the way through, use a meat thermometer, and you want to put that in the thickest part of the meat. When you have food that's being served, you want to make sure you keep hot foods at a minimum of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're having parties or graduation parties or family get-togethers or it's the holidays, crock pots are nice. You want to keep the warm food from sitting out too long, that it doesn't get cold. Recommended internal temperatures when you're using your meat thermometer to make sure your food is cooked thoroughly. Steak, roast, pork chops should be an internal temperature of 145 degrees. Ground beef and pork should be 160 degrees, and poultry should be 165 degrees. Chill, you want to set your refrigerator to 40 degrees or below. Freezer should be set to 0 degrees or below. You want to refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. So once you finish cooking the food, by the time you get to 2 hours later, it should be back in the refrigerator. The sooner the better. If it's really hot out, maybe you're having a family reunion or a picnic and it's 90 degrees outside, that time that it can be left setting out needs to be shorter. So if it's over 90 degrees out, put that stuff back in the refrigerator within an hour. When you're shopping, make sure you can get home and put perishable foods in the refrigerator within 2 hours. It is good, especially in the summer, to take a cooler with you so you can put the perishable foods in and they don't get too warm as you're traveling home. Chill, you want to discard leftovers after they've been in the refrigerator for 3 days. If you're thawing food, you take your hamburger out of the freezer, you can have some options. You can put it in the refrigerator. It'll be a slower thaw. It'll take a little while, but it is in a safe temperature range. Cold water, you can put your food in the cold water, but you want to continually change the cold water so it stays cold and it doesn't rise up into that temperature zone where bacteria would grow. Or for a quicker way to thaw your food, you can put it in the microwave, but you never want to leave food at room temperature because that's putting it into a danger zone where your bacteria really likes to grow. So the danger zone is anywhere between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's really the temperature zone that bacteria really like to and can grow very quickly. The bacteria tends to double every 20 minutes in that danger zone, so it's really important to get your leftovers put away as soon as possible. And of course, when you're serving food, keep your cold foods cold. You don't want to let food warm up. And there's different things you can do. If you're having a party or a get-together, you can get bowls that go in the freezer that are kind of like their own little ice pack. You can get, I've seen some people get like a kid's blow-up pool and put ice in it and they put all the salads or the cold food in the blow-up pool just to keep it cold. High-risk populations when it comes to people who might be more at risk for getting very sick from food poisoning. Pregnant women, infants, young children, older adults, anybody who may have some sort of illness that compromises their immune system. And basically it's just because their immune system can't fight off that illness as well. A lot of times you'll hear about food poisoning in the news, and there have been some big cases and some very big outbreaks that have caused a lot of recalls and things, investigations. One very large case of food poisoning outbreak was from the Peanut Corporation of America. And that occurred in 2008. It was a salmonella outbreak. At that time, there were people who were getting very sick, and they had a hard time figuring out what the company was that was causing the illness. And they related it to peanut butter, products with peanut butter, but so they started pulling all those things off the shelf until they actually narrowed it down. Well, the problem was this corporation had produced bulk peanut butter and sent it to other companies to make peanut butter cookies and peanut butter crackers. From that outbreak, there were 700 people who got sick, 9 people who died, and the owner did face 28 years in jail because the conditions of the company were very, very poor. In 2014, there was a cantaloupe farmer that there was a listeria outbreak that was tied back to the farm. In that case, there's 150 people who were confirmed sick from that. 30 people actually died. The owners were sentenced to 5 years probation, and they had a $150,000 fine. So when there's those widespread outbreaks, there are going to be some major recalls. The FDA wants to get those foods, those products off of the shelves so nobody else gets sick. And there's going to be investigations to go back to those companies and find out what's causing this illness and prevent it from happening again. Another big one was in the summer of 2018. There was a company that made whey powder that was, again, bulk, and it was sent out to many companies that put it in their products. Again, it was a salmonella outbreak, and there was a lot of products. Some of them were things like Goldfish crackers, Ritz crackers, Honey Smack cereal, Hungry Man frozen dinners, snack cakes, that all were recalled. And it seemed like for a while there were a lot of recalls coming every couple days that were leading back to this company. So it is a problem, and it's a very preventable problem. If you, especially at home, make sure that you are practicing safe food handling and making sure that your food is safe. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys later.